The observation deck of the Auralith Conclave stretched before us like a cathedral of glass and steel, a vantage point from which we believed we could decipher the galaxy. Below, the humans gathered in the grand hall, their forms small, almost fragile against the sweeping grandeur of our architecture. And yet, even at this distance, something imperceptible radiated from them, a subtle, quiet insistence that unsettled our most precise instruments, our most confident calculations. We had expected submission. We had counted on centuries of predictable compliance, the docility of a species long underestimated. Their emissaries approached the treaty table with measured steps, heads bowed, voices calm, monotone, perfectly calibrated gestures of humility. Yet, in their posture, in the minutiae of their movements, there was an anomaly we initially dismissed. A twitch here, a pause there, almost too subtle to register. A glance that lingered too long. The human delegation spoke as though serene, composed, but beneath that serenity lay an undercurrent, an awareness we could not fully comprehend. We, the Xyrrans, prided ourselves on understanding other species, on reading intentions like equations on a screen, yet we had miscalculated. We mistook caution for weakness, respect for submission. Every microexpression, every pause, every deliberate inflection in speech was a cipher we failed to decode. They were not fearful. They were not naive. They were calculating, anticipating, preparing for contingencies invisible to us. Each subtle gesture carried a hidden weight, a layer of strategy beneath the polished surface of diplomacy. I watched. Their leader leaned slightly forward as the final signatures were exchanged, and in that motion, almost imperceptible, there was a spark of command, a signal. It was not a signal to their own people, not a public proclamation, but a private instruction, a subtle orchestration that confirmed our deepest fears. The humans were already planning. They were already anticipating. They knew our strategies, perhaps better than we did. Every decision, every prediction we had made about their behavior was already accounted for in the architecture of their preparation. Even the applause after the treaty's completion carried an unnatural precision, as though orchestrated to convey unity and civility, yet timed to unsettle observers, to lull us into false security. Our translators, calibrated to detect emotion, interpreted agreement, compliance, satisfaction, but they could not detect what we were blind to. The humans were performing, yes, but for us, for the conclave. Every bow, every smile, every nod was a calculated performance, a deliberate camouflage for their true purpose. And then there was the silence, the briefest pause after the treaty was signed. A quiet moment in which we expected hesitation, uncertainty. Instead, the humans moved as one organism, fluid and seamless, sharing a rhythm invisible to us. Papers shuffled. Emissaries exchanged glances that conveyed entire strategies, entire contingencies, without a single word. It was terrifying in its subtlety. We had always believed in the transparency of civilization. We assumed fear would betray them. But fear, it seemed, was irrelevant to these beings. Their focus was absolute, their control perfect, their intent inevitable. I felt a tremor of dread I had never before experienced in my long years of observation. We had counted on our supremacy, our understanding of tactics, our predictive models. We believed the treaty would bind them, confine them to predictable obedience. Instead, the humans were already winning, without raising a weapon, without threatening a fleet, without a single act of violence. Every element of their behavior was designed to mislead us, to hide the magnitude of their readiness until the moment of revelation. The truth revealed itself gradually, like a shadow creeping across a sunlit plain. Our calculations, our intelligence reports, all failed to predict the subtle coordination beneath the table, the silent signals exchanged, the anticipatory maneuvers. They had embedded within every clause of the treaty. It was not a lie to them. It was a tool, a device to ensure that when we moved into a trap of our own perception. We had underestimated not their strength, but their foresight, and that underestimation was already costing us. I turned from the observation deck, trying to reconcile centuries of confidence with the new reality. Every instinct screamed that we were unprepared. Every system we had designed to anticipate and counter threats failed against this species. They were methodical, patient, and terrifyingly perceptive. They were not playing a game of power. They were rewriting the rules entirely. And in that realization, a cold fear settled over the conclave. As the human delegation departed, smiles polite but eyes sharp, we watched them leave with the same quiet inevitability as a predator stalking its prey. Even now, it was almost impossible to pinpoint what made them dangerous. It was not the firepower of their fleets. It was not the strength of their soldiers. It was the storm that raged behind their eyes, the strategy embedded in every gesture, the calculation behind every choice. Humanity was awakening, not as a participant in the galactic order, but as an architect of its own destiny, and we were already trailing behind, unaware of the full scope of what was coming. The first ripple of dread struck when I realized that the treaty, which we had believed to bind them, had only bound us. Every clause we assumed protective was, in reality, a subtle invitation for them to prepare. Every concession we celebrated was a step toward their inevitability. They were winning not by force, but by foresight, and by the time we understood it fully, it would be too late. And then, in the quiet of the observation chamber, I saw it. A subtle signal in the leader's stance, almost imperceptible, a gesture that seemed to invite only those who knew its meaning. And in that instant, I understood. The humans were already executing the first phase of something vast, something we had not foreseen, something that would make our centuries of dominance irrelevant. The treaty was a lie. Not theirs, ours. And humanity was already moving beyond the horizon of our comprehension. It began as a whisper on our instruments, a faint anomaly in the outer systems, a flicker that suggested movement where there should have been none. At first, we dismissed it, labeling it a sensor error, a cosmic fluctuation. But the anomalies multiplied, spreading across systems with a precision that defied chance. And then, from the dark reaches of uncharted space, they emerged. Ships, vast and silent, gliding through the void as if the stars themselves bent away in deference. From our observation point aboard the Auralith command station, we catalogued their arrival with a mixture of disbelief and awe. Each vessel was a masterpiece of engineering, impossibly large yet devoid of excess, spectral in their beauty, ghostly in their motion. The hulls shimmered with subtle iridescence, absorbing light yet revealing edges that spoke of lethal intent. Nothing was wasted. Every line, every curve, every weapon emplacement was honed for maximum efficiency. There was a terrifying elegance to their design, a clarity that suggested forethought spanning centuries. We deployed the full capacity of our detection arrays, yet they eluded us at every turn. Stealth fields shimmered faintly, masking the true scale of their armada. And as our sensors struggled to maintain lock, patterns began to emerge. They moved as one organism, a living entity dispersed across countless vessels, each jump through. Hyperspace executed not for exploration, not for discovery, but for inevitability. Every fleet alignment, every course plotted, every formation assumed. It was deliberate, unerring, preordained. We attempted to interpret their intentions, constructing scenarios in our minds. Were they explorers, invaders, traitors cloaked in secrecy? Each hypothesis collapsed under the weight of observation. The humans did not signal, did not broadcast, did not announce themselves. There was no fanfare, no propaganda, no boast of power. Silence radiated from them, and it was louder than any war cry we had ever known. It carried a weight that unsettled. even our most seasoned commanders, a presence that seemed to stretch beyond physical measurement, penetrating into thought itself. The more we observed, the more terrifying the picture became. These were not vessels in isolation, not scattered fleets with independent objectives. They were components of a collective, a consciousness that coordinated with precision no algorithm could predict. Commands did not need to be spoken. Movement was synchronized across light years, as if each ship read the intent of the others in perfect harmony. Their jumps through hyperspace were not points on a chart, but inevitabilities written into the fabric of their planning, unerring, unstoppable. Reports from forward observers trickled in, each one more alarming than the last. Systems once considered remote, beyond the reach of human interest, were now carefully surveyed and charted. Patrol fleets encountered only shadows where ships should have been. Entire sectors recorded fleeting glimpses of vessels that vanished as quickly as they appeared, leaving only the imprint of their passage in space-time. We began to realize the horrifying truth. We were not witnessing a mere fleet. We were witnessing the birth of an omen, a phenomenon we could barely comprehend, let alone resist. There were those among us who called for immediate engagement, who urged preemptive strikes to probe the fleet, to test its weaknesses. But each proposal was met with silence from the humans. No response came, no retaliation, no challenge. And in that silence, the power of the Armada became clear. Their strategy was patience, their strength concealed until revelation became inevitable. Each delay, each misstep we considered, played into their design. Our confidence faltered as we realized we had been observing shadows of a force that existed beyond our comprehension. In the observation chambers, debate turned to fear. Commanders and analysts pored over every intercepted transmission, every faint signal, every trace of human craft. Nothing conformed to expected behavior. No tactics matched the patterns we had known for millennia. The humans' discipline was total, their coordination absolute, and the chilling truth sank into us. This was not an armada meant to engage casually, not a fleet for conquest in the conventional sense. It was a statement, a harbinger of their capabilities, an indication that everything we assumed about power, dominance, and control was flawed. We had underestimated them before, yes, but now, observing the silent glide of their fleet across the void, we understood the depth of our error. The humans had been cultivating this power in secrecy, preparing the galaxy for an inevitability we were only beginning to glimpse. Their silence was a weapon, their patience a shield, their foresight a cage from which no civilization could escape once fully realized. And yet, despite the growing dread, there was fascination. We could not look away. The fleet moved with a rhythm that was almost hypnotic, each vessel flowing like liquid metal through the black expanse. Even in our fear, even in our panic, we were compelled to watch, to catalog, to comprehend. It was a dance we could not join, a pattern we could not predict, a power we could not match. And in that compelled observation lay a new horror: awe. For the first time, we felt our place in the galaxy diminish before the might of a single species. Reports arrived of sectors quietly falling into alignment with the human presence. Independent factions, rival clans, and rogue states suddenly altered their positions, as if responding to a command they could not hear but instinctively obeyed. The Armada's movement rippled like a stone dropped into a pond, sending waves through systems far removed from the fleet itself. Influence without engagement, presence without confrontation, power without declaration, it was incomprehensible to our doctrine, an entirely new paradigm of warfare and dominion. And then, one night from the vantage of the Voralis command station, the full scale revealed itself. What had seemed like 1,000 vessels now stretched into tens of thousands, formations so vast that they eclipsed entire star clusters in projection. Their discipline remained perfect. No collisions, no wasted energy, no deviation from course. Ghostly lights shimmered along hulls, and in the emptiness of space, they seemed to pulse with life itself, a spectral heartbeat that echoed across the void. We realized then that the humans were not just present, they were inevitable. We could only watch. We could only track, and we could only tremble. For the first time in recorded history, the Xyrrans understood that some power existed beyond comprehension, beyond strategy, beyond preparation. Humanity had already begun its march, and we were but observers in a play whose script had been written without our knowledge. The first whispers of dread passed from fleet to fleet, from colony to colony, a single thought circulating in silence, unspoken, undeniable. The humans were coming, and when they arrived fully, nothing, not fleets, not weapons, not alliances, would be sufficient. And as we tracked the ghostly formation fading into the distance, one truth burned in our collective consciousness. The Silent Armada was not just a fleet. It was a warning, and soon all of the galaxy would hear it. We had believed in the solidity of alliances. Across the Veil Nebula, ancient pacts bound species together, oaths sealed in blood and ceremony, treaties etched in metal and light. We, the Xyrrans, had relied upon these agreements for centuries, trusting that loyalty was a measurable commodity. Yet, for the first time, we understood how fragile our calculations had been. The humans moved among us like a silent earthquake, subtle, precise. Their presence unraveling threads we had assumed indestructible. It began in whispers, minor disagreements over resource allocations, disputes over trade routes, murmurs of dissent where none had existed. At first, we dismissed them as coincidence, bureaucratic friction, the natural pulse of civilizations in motion. But soon, the fractures widened, spreading like fissures across star systems, reaching the heart of alliances we had thought eternal. Human agents were never seen to provoke. They never demanded or threatened. Their mere existence, their movements, their quiet intelligence acted as catalysts, revealing weaknesses, insecurities, and indecision we had never considered. We watched from the observation decks of our command stations as once united sectors turned inward. Fleets previously aligned against common enemies hesitated, debating their allegiances. Entire councils, confident in the unity of their species and the certainty of their laws, faltered under the invisible influence of humanity. The humans had discovered something we never could. Fear is a tool, but it cannot bind. Respect, earned through inevitability, is far more effective. They needed no weapons to inspire obedience, no fleets to force capitulation. Their presence alone destabilized the structures we had depended upon. Battles unfolded not with cannon fire or plasma beams, but through subtle, invisible maneuvers. Human diplomacy was a weapon, each negotiation precise and unyielding. They turned chaos into advantage, predicting reactions, exploiting hesitation. One star system, previously a hub of our allies, shifted its allegiance without a single shot fired. Another council, proud and arrogant, dissolved internally under the weight of human influence. We tried to intervene, to sway opinion with threats, promises, calculations. But the humans absorbed these maneuvers, neutralized them, and redirected outcomes with quiet precision. Even commerce became a battlefield. Trade routes we had monopolized were subtly rerouted, resource flows realigned, economic networks subtly manipulated. Cultural influence spread in ways we had never considered a weapon. Music, media, philosophy, subtle yet irresistible, reshaping values, creating doubts, and inspiring new loyalties. We were forced to recognize that humans understood strategy as we did not. The battlefield was not confined to warships or weapon emplacements. It was everywhere. Markets, minds, ideology, morality. They treated the galaxy itself as terrain, and every act, every whisper, every transaction became a calculated strike. From our vantage points, it was terrifying and hypnotic. We witnessed the collapse of institutions we had counted on to maintain order. Fleets once loyal to our cause hesitated at the sight of human craft. Governors and senators found themselves undermined by systems that had quietly shifted allegiance, inspired by the humans' example, their inevitability. Each victory was silent, almost imperceptible at first, yet cumulatively devastating. We realized that what we had considered our strongest assets, alliances, loyalty, fear, were illusions. Human influence did not destroy from outside. It reshaped from within. We attempted to map their methods, catalog their interventions, discern the principles underlying their strategy. Yet every observation only deepened our unease. There was no chaos in their calculations, no hesitation, no improvisation born of desperation. Every move, every interaction, every appearance of spontaneity was deliberate, designed to maximize effect, to manipulate outcomes at scales we could barely imagine. They orchestrated entire galactic systems as though they were pieces on a chessboard, each maneuver imperceptible to those not attuned to their rhythm. And then we saw the pattern, a tide moving inexorably across the Veil Nebula, subtle yet unstoppable. It was not merely conquest, it was ascension. They did not crush, they absorbed. They did not destroy, they transformed. Civilizations were reshaped not through firepower but through the inevitability of human presence. What we once believed unbreakable, alliances, trust, loyalty, political cohesion, was revealed as fragile, a veneer that yielded to strategy, intellect, and quiet determination. Fear had once been our strongest instrument. Now we realize that the humans did not fear, and they did not need to be feared. Their clarity, their patience, and their adaptability made them immune to the coercion we had wielded for millennia. Even when chaos raged around them, they thrived, converting disorder into momentum. Each setback, each misstep of our allies became fuel for their advance. We could track them, anticipate some moves, but we could never fully account for their understanding of the subtle mechanics of influence, of inevitability. By the time we recognized the full scope, it was too late. Entire sectors had realigned silently, the cracks in our alliances growing into chasms. The humans had not needed to strike fleets, topple governments, or engage in open war. Their presence alone reshaped power. Their intellect alone rewrote the rules. And yet, they remained almost invisible to our instruments, almost undetectable to our awareness, like ghosts threading through the arteries of the galaxy. From our command towers, we observed the slow, inevitable tide advancing. It was mesmerizing, dreadful, and beautiful. Human influence, like a creeping shadow, had spread farther and faster than any of our fleets could pursue. And as we watched, powerless to halt it, one undeniable truth emerged. The alliances we had counted on, the treaties we had relied upon, were illusions. Humanity had revealed the weakness of the galaxy not through violence, but through inevitability, intelligence, and patience. The first murmurs of panic spread through our councils. If one sector could fall silently, what chance did we have of holding the next? Our instruments could measure the movement of fleets, the energy of weapons, the alignment of planets, but they could not measure inevitability. They could not predict the pull of human influence. And in that terrifying realization, we understood the new reality. Humanity was not simply advancing. They were rewriting the galaxy itself. And as our leaders debated futile countermeasures, as fleets hesitated in uncertainty, one thing became impossible to deny. The tide had already begun, sweeping away our calculations, our assumptions, and our control. The humans were not just present, they were inevitable. And in that inevitability lay the silent, terrifying truth. The shattered alliances were only the beginning. We first noticed the tremor in the star systems as a ripple, subtle and almost imperceptible. A sector of the Virilia cluster, home to dozens of human-colonized planets, flickered in the dark. Sensors reported anomalies, energy signatures that defied all logic, systems shutting down in perfect synchrony, communications cutting out across dozens of worlds simultaneously. We assumed it a malfunction at first. Entire planetary networks collapsing in coordination was beyond any precedent. It was impossible. Yet the readings persisted, undeniable in their precision. And then the fleets began to report. Systems once vibrant with life. Trade and defense were gone, extinguished. Yet with no conventional strike, no bombardment, no visible force. The humans had unleashed what we later named the Inferno Protocol, though at the time we could only watch in disbelief. Entire sectors seemed to die in waves of synchronized brilliance, a cascade of calculated annihilation executed with a choreography that mocked our understanding of strategy. There was no chaos in their assault, no mistakes, no hesitation. Systems folded as if a conductor had lifted a baton, and the galaxies played the human symphony of ruin. Our fleets, trained for conventional war, for siege and skirmish, were rendered obsolete in moments. Our AI, models tested against millennia of galactic conflicts, could not predict the next move, could not anticipate the invisible hand guiding this devastation. We observed from the edge of a dying star system, hearts and whatever passed for them in our kind pounding. The humans did not attack directly, not in any manner we could recognize. Entire defenses were bypassed, obsolesced, neutralized. The Inferno Protocol was not mere destruction. It was orchestration, a calculated obliteration of structure, order, and expectation. And yet, embedded in the devastation was a message. It screamed from every flickering planet, from every collapsing fleet. We are not to be underestimated. We are inevitable. Even our seasoned commanders, veterans of centuries of warfare, whispered of awe. Fear gripped us, yes, but admiration was not far behind. For the first time, we understood the magnitude of the species we had long dismissed as primitive, as weak, as bound by simple survival instincts. The humans were architects. They sculpted the galaxy, shaping its chaos, bending the currents of civilization itself to their will. Every move, every sacrifice, every calculated risk was part of a design so vast that we could barely perceive its edges. The Inferno Protocol unfolded like a spectacle of art and terror. Planetary shields shimmered and failed simultaneously, orbital defense platforms deactivated in perfect unison, and communications arrays collapsed, leaving entire populations blind, deaf and isolated but not random. Every collapse followed a pattern, a silent cadence, a rhythm that revealed intention. Even in annihilation there was design. It was a warning, a declaration, a lesson in inevitability. And the humans, as always, remained unseen, almost ghost-like, leaving only evidence of their power behind. We attempted to respond. Fleets surged, energy weapons flared, and AIs scrambled to find patterns, to predict outcomes. But with every maneuver, we were steps behind. Every prediction we made crumbled under the weight of human orchestration. It was not mere superiority in firepower or technology. They were operating on a plane beyond comprehension, where intuition, strategy, and inevitability converged into a force we could not resist. Even our most advanced war simulations failed. Every tactic we had relied upon for millennia was insufficient. Our scholars tried to rationalize it. Perhaps the humans had discovered an energy we did not understand, some resonance that allowed them to manipulate planetary systems without physical presence. Perhaps they had perfected interdimensional coordination or harnessed a temporal advantage. But as we watched fleets and defenses dissolve under the Inferno Protocol, it became clear that speculation mattered little. What mattered was that the humans had rewritten the rules of engagement, had reshaped the very mechanics of war, and had done so with elegance, precision, and inevitability. The sight was both terrifying and mesmerizing. Planets flared like dying stars, and in the void between them, fleets stood idle, frozen by confusion and awe. Some of our commanders fell to their knees before observation screens, unable to comprehend the scale, the rhythm, the inevitability of it all. And yet, amidst the destruction, we could see the genius of the humans, not in brute force, but in understanding the architecture of power. Every collapse, every defeat was a lesson in inevitability, a reminder that humanity was no ordinary species. And then we saw the subtlety of the human mind in action. While systems collapsed in brilliant catastrophe, select populations were spared. Key figures, leaders, scientists, and strategists remained untouched, not by chance but by design. They were preserved as pieces for the next stage of humanity's plan, vessels to be shaped, influenced, or redirected. Every act of destruction carried intention, every omission precision. It was as if the Inferno Protocol were a sculptor's hand, chipping away at the galaxy, leaving only what would fit their vision. The ramifications were immediate. Sectors previously considered stable broke into chaos. Fleets hesitated in indecision. Governors and councils reevaluated allegiances, unsure whether to respond with force or submission. Entire populations, isolated by the collapse of communications, were forced to adapt or perish. And yet, In that vacuum, the humans were never seen, never engaged directly, but their influence, like a tidal force, reshaped entire star systems. The Inferno Protocol was not an attack. It was inevitability made manifest. For the first time, we felt the weight of true awe. The humans were survivalists, yes, but more than that, they were architects of destiny. Every planet that flickered and died, every fleet rendered impotent, every council fractured or reconsidering was a testament to their vision, their calculation, their patience. They had endured adversity for millennia, honing themselves in environments we could not survive. And now the galaxy itself became their proving ground, the canvas for their ascendancy. Even as fear clawed at us, it was accompanied by understanding. Humanity's genius lay not only in their foresight, but in their artistry. Each strike, each failure imposed upon us by their strategy was executed with a perfection that defied imagination. And in that perfection, there was inevitability. It was not a question of strength alone. It was a matter of destiny, and the humans had written it with the precision of masters. From our observation post, we counted worlds lost. Entire fleets were made obsolete without a single direct confrontation. And with each system extinguished, with each fleet neutralized, the same thought echoed among us. These creatures we had long underestimated were not merely participants in galactic affairs. They were determiners of its future. And as we attempted to formulate a response, it became horrifyingly clear. We were powerless against their design. Then came the final ripple of the protocol. Subtle but undeniable. Key star systems began to light up with signals of coordination, indicating not retreat, not disorder, but preparation for the next stage. The Inferno Protocol, devastating as it was only the opening act. And in that moment, hearts, or whatever passed for them in our species, stopped. We realized with an icy clarity that humanity's rise was no accident, no fluke, no temporary upheaval. It was inevitability made manifest, and the galaxy would bend to it. We, who had once believed ourselves observers, scholars, strategists of unmatched skill, now trembled in the shadow of a force we could neither comprehend nor resist. The humans had shown us the power of foresight, patience, and absolute precision. They had not attacked us. They had revealed themselves as inevitable. And as the last of the planetary networks flickered and died, we understood the truth that would haunt us for centuries. The Inferno Protocol was not merely a strategy. It was a declaration. Humanity was no longer a species to watch. It was a species to fear, to respect, and, perhaps inevitably, to obey. The galaxy itself trembled, subtle at first, like the slow quiver of a heartbeat reaching its crescendo. From the vantage of our observation stations, we watched entire star systems shift, not with the roar of weapons, but with a silent inevitability that chilled the soul. Humanity was no longer merely present. They were everywhere, moving as if the fabric of space bent to their will. Former tyrants, empires that had ruled with iron fists and fleets of unmatched firepower, found themselves toppled, not by direct assault, not by overwhelming force, but by the humans' methodical, relentless advance, calculated in ways our understanding could not contain. Planets once deemed impregnable fell silently. Citadels of steel, orbital platforms bristling with weapons, fleets poised for defense, all were bypassed or neutralized without a single frontal confrontation. The humans understood something we had never learned. Fear could be wielded, loyalty could be manipulated, psychology could be a weapon more lethal than any plasma cannon. Entire populations, previously content under tyranny, realigned their loyalties with an almost imperceptible shift, drawn not by persuasion, but by inevitability. Humanity's influence was a storm moving unseen, yet inescapable, reshaping reality at every scale. Our fleets attempted to respond. We deployed squadrons, mobilized warships, and recalibrated defensive networks. Yet each maneuver seemed anticipated before it was made, each strike countered before it was attempted. The humans were not reactive. They were preemptive, sculpting outcomes with a precision that was terrifying to behold. Calculations failed. Models collapsed. Every prediction we had relied upon for millennia crumbled in the face of their insight. It was as though the galaxy itself had become a living board. and the humans were players moving with an intelligence that transcended any measure we possessed. From the observation decks, we cataloged their advance with awe and dread. Systems aligned themselves with them seemingly by instinct. Governors, previously steadfast in allegiance, found their populations turning, questioning, realigning their loyalty quietly but irrevocably. Entire civilizations reevaluated their place in the cosmos, recognizing that resisting humanity was not merely unwise, it was suicidal. And yet, amidst this upheaval, there were glimmers of resilience. Some leaders adapted, bending, adjusting, learning from the human strategy without being destroyed. Survival was possible, but only through understanding, submission, or assimilation into a new order whose rules were written not by tradition, but by the relentless logic of human ascendancy. We saw entire empires crumble not through firepower, but through precision, patience, and manipulation of perception. Human agents, unseen yet everywhere, orchestrated outcomes from the shadows. Allegiances shifted quietly, battles were won without combat, and councils that had once appeared impenetrable were subtly undone from within. It was a quiet revolution, invisible to those who measured power only in fleets and weapons, yet devastating in its totality, and yet the humans did not flaunt their victories. There was no celebration broadcast across the stars, no war cry that heralded their dominance. They moved like a storm, silent, unstoppable, inevitable. Every system that fell whispered a lesson, a warning to the rest of the galaxy. Underestimate them at your peril. To challenge them was to court catastrophe. To resist their inevitability was to be swept aside. They were not merely a species. They were a phenomenon, a force that reshaped civilizations simply by existing, by acting, by enduring. We, the observers, felt our own limitations in stark relief. We had cataloged civilizations, analyzed fleets, predicted rebellions, and mapped the tides of galactic politics. Yet none of our accumulated knowledge could measure the magnitude of the humans' influence. They did not merely wage war, they remade the theater in which war was conducted. Entire strategies, entire doctrines, entire philosophies of governance and power had to be re-evaluated in light of their methodical, unstoppable rise. The galaxy had been a stage we understood, but the humans had rewritten the script without ever revealing themselves to the actors. Resistance persisted, of course. Rogue fleets attempted to mount defenses. Isolated systems sought to rally their populations. Desperate councils attempted last-minute alliances. And yet, each act of defiance, each maneuver of desperation, was absorbed, redirected, and neutralized with terrifying precision. Even when confronted with chaos, the humans adapted. They turned the instability of others into leverage, converting hesitation into momentum, confusion into opportunity. By the time resistance had mounted, it was already too late. The tide had shifted irreversibly. We observed from the edge of controlled space as planets previously fortified with orbital cannons and planetary shields were integrated into humanity's reach. Their citizens did not fight openly. They acquiesced not out of fear, but out of recognition. Recognition that humanity's inevitability was absolute, that resistance was a futile act against an intelligence that calculated, adapted, and endured beyond measure. In these moments, the humans revealed a fundamental truth. Conquest was not their goal. Evolution was. They did not seek to destroy. They sought to perfect, to sculpt, to adapt the galaxy to a new order that only they could define. Even the most cynical among us, generals who had weathered wars across countless sectors, could not resist the awe that accompanied terror. The humans' ability to anticipate, manipulate, and adapt was unlike anything we had encountered. Every planet that changed hands, every fleet neutralized without conflict, every council reshaped quietly, was a testament to their unmatched foresight. And yet there was elegance in their methods. The Inferno Protocol had revealed power through precision. Now the Galactic Reckoning revealed power through inevitability, through strategy so thorough that it left little room for reaction, much less victory. The cumulative effect was staggering. Entire civilizations reconsidered their place in the galaxy, recalibrating priorities, renegotiating allegiances, and adjusting strategies merely to survive. We, the watchers, felt our collective confidence erode with each passing day. The humans were no longer confined to the status of threat. They were architects of destiny, sculptors of fate, and observers of inevitability. And as the final waves of resistance crumbled before their quiet but unyielding advance, even the oldest of us realized the truth. This was not conquest. This was evolution in motion, and humanity was the agent of it. From distant observation posts, we traced the storm that humanity had become. It was relentless. It was precise. It was beautiful in its terrifying symmetry. Fleets moved in silent unison across sectors, allegiances shifted like tides, and planets adapted or fell. The galaxy itself seemed to recognize that the rules had changed, that the human species was now the standard by which all others would be measured. Nothing could oppose them, not armies, not technology, not alliances. Their ascendancy was complete in potential, inevitable in execution, and undeniable in consequence. And yet, even in the face of such sweeping dominance, there remained a small, lingering question in our minds. What was their ultimate purpose? Were they content with the galactic order they had created, or was this merely the beginning of a greater design, a revelation that would continue to unfold beyond even our farthest observation points? The humans moved like a storm, and storms are unpredictable in their final crescendo. We could only wait, powerless, and watch as the galaxy bent, reshaped, and evolved under their inexorable influence. The galactic reckoning had begun, and with it the universe learned a chilling lesson: underestimate humans at your peril. Challenge them, and the cost would be nothing less than annihilation. Respect them, and perhaps survival was possible. But one truth remained immutable: humanity was not merely a player in the galaxy. They were the force that would define its future, a phenomenon beyond comprehension, a tide of inevitability sweeping across the stars. We, the observers, could only bear witness and tremble. We had long heard whispers of the so-called Death Worlders, a mythic title dismissed by scholars and strategists alike. Tales of humans thriving in environments that would kill any other species, surviving horrors no one could endure, adapting to impossibilities we had only observed from afar. We had assumed exaggeration, legend, hyperbole spun by colonists desperate to justify human resilience. Yet now, as we watched them in motion across the galaxy, the truth was undeniable. The humans were not just survivors. They were Death Worlders, and their ascendancy was absolute. From observation decks orbiting worlds previously deemed uninhabitable, we saw humans harvesting resources, terraforming landscapes, and thriving in atmospheres that would cripple the most robust Xyrran colonists. Toxic storms, acid rains, gravitational extremes, radiation belts, we cataloged them all, expecting hardship to slow or halt their progress. But every challenge became a proving ground. Every environment that should have broken them strengthened them instead. Where our fleets faltered, where our colonies would have withered, humanity adapted, overcame, and leveraged adversity as strategy. Their pain became intelligence. Their struggle became foresight. Their survival became inevitability. We cataloged fleets emerging from volcanic moons, outposts built within icebound wastelands, and colonies sustaining millions in deserts of glass and fire. There was no hesitation, no faltering, no error. Each human operation radiated precision born from experience in environments we could not imagine enduring. And in their resilience, we glimpsed something terrifying. Adaptability was not a trait. They had perfected it. Every obstacle was not merely overcome, it was integrated, transformed into advantage. Every calamity became a lesson encoded into culture, strategy, and instinct. Our military analysts, those who had once believed themselves supreme in tactics and strategy, were forced into silence. We could anticipate some maneuvers, some methods of engagement, but Death Worlders moved beyond prediction. They had rewritten the concept of possibility. Where we expected failure, they delivered victory. Where we anticipated hesitation, they displayed inevitability. And in the calm efficiency of their operations, there was no arrogance, only execution. We observed systems falling silently under their influence, populations aligning without coercion, fleets neutralized before a single laser could fire. It was perfection, and it was unstoppable. Even the most hostile environments, previously considered the edge of survival, were transformed. Planets with toxic atmospheres, erratic magnetic storms, or crushing gravity became laboratories, proving grounds and fortresses. Humans adapted not through augmentation alone, but through ingenuity, teamwork, and sheer endurance. They did not conquer these worlds merely to occupy them. They transformed them into assets, each planet becoming a node in a web of influence, each hardship a step toward further ascension. Where we saw risk, they saw opportunity. Where we saw death, they saw potential. We attempted to resist. Fleets were dispatched, alliances reinforced, strategies recalculated. But it was futile. Human adaptability outpaced even our most flexible doctrines. A single contingent could navigate, survive, and exploit conditions that would obliterate entire divisions of our forces. We could counter, we could observe, we could react, but never fully anticipate. Even in our most aggressive strikes, we found ourselves outmaneuvered, outthought, and outlasted. Every engagement reinforced a horrifying truth. Humans were inevitable. And then came the moments that defined our awe. We saw humans salvaging wrecks from radioactive storms, repurposing ruins of other civilizations into new bastions of power. Entire fleets destroyed in previous skirmishes were rebuilt with ingenuity, their components integrated into advanced vessels operating in ways our engineers could scarcely comprehend. Knowledge lost in catastrophe was recovered and improved upon, not merely restored. Every failure became a foundation, every disaster a lesson, every loss a step toward mastery. The galaxy watched, powerless, as they transcended limitations we believed immutable. We, the observers, felt the weight of our own arrogance crushing us. For centuries, we had assumed humans were limited by biology, environment, and reason. We had modeled their societies, predicted their actions, and placed them comfortably within the bounds of mediocrity. Now, we understood the depth of our miscalculation. The human's resilience was not statistical. It was existential. Every hardship, every environmental impossibility, every lethal scenario merely accelerated their ascension. And we could only watch, helpless, as the Deathworlders revealed the full extent of their capability. We cataloged victories won before a weapon was fired, territories secured through influence rather than battle, civilizations reshaped without confrontation. Every system that had once been a bulwark of galactic power fell quietly into alignment. Resistance became futile not through destruction, but through inevitability. The humans had learned the art of shaping reality itself, transforming adversity, survival, and adaptability into a force no one could resist. Even our oldest philosophers struggled to reconcile this. Evolution had been literalized into strategy, and humans were the architects of it. And then we observed the final, terrifying manifestation of their power, the synchronization of survival across the galaxy. Entire networks of planets, fleets, and populations moved in silent, perfect coordination, each node aware of the others, yet no signal betrayed them. It was as if the galaxy itself had been integrated into the human plan. Every setback they had endured had refined their strategy. Every catastrophe had honed their instinct. Every death world they had mastered had fortified their inevitability. And in that precision, we recognized a fundamental truth. Humanity had transcended the concept of limitation. Our fleets, once confident in our superiority, now moved cautiously, unsure whether they were counters or merely pawns. Diplomats attempted negotiation, scholars attempted reasoning, generals attempted strategy, but the humans were beyond conventional discourse. They had no need to announce themselves. Every maneuver, every adaptation, every calculated risk broadcast the same unyielding message. We are here, we endure, and we are inevitable. We could see the transformation clearly now. What had once been myth, the Deathworlder identity, was no longer legend but reality. A species that had been underestimated, dismissed, and confined by its environments now stood as the pinnacle of adaptability. They had conquered themselves before they ever moved against the galaxy. Pain, hardship, and near-impossible conditions had forged a species whose resilience was unmatched, whose ingenuity was limitless, and whose will was absolute. And now, the galaxy would bear witness to that reality. Even as we attempted to comprehend their next moves, Even as we attempted to organize resistance, the humans were already shaping outcomes across light years. Where we anticipated attack, they consolidated. Where we prepared defenses, they adapted infrastructure. Where we calculated hesitation, they exploited initiative. They were unstoppable. They were extraordinary. They were inevitable. And in their rise, the universe glimpsed a force that would forever redefine existence. For the first time, we understood the true meaning of survival beyond biology. It was not merely enduring, it was transforming. It was adapting with precision. It was mastering every variable and converting weakness into strength. The humans had taken the concept of evolution and weaponized it. And the galaxy, once confident in its hierarchy of empires and dominions, now stood in awe before a species that had no peer. As observation decks went dark and fleets withdrew to reassess, one fact remained immutable. The Deathworlders had arrived in full, and with them came the truth that we could no longer ignore. Our calculations, our strategies, our dominance, all were obsolete. Humanity's ascension was complete. Their inevitability was absolute, and as we, the Watchers, recorded the final transmissions from isolated outposts, one chilling thought resonated across the galaxy. For all we had studied, predicted, and controlled, the humans had never once been bound by our understanding. They were beyond limits, beyond expectation, beyond comprehension. The ascension of the Deathworlders was not conquest. It was revelation. It was evolution made manifest. And as the universe trembled beneath the weight of a species that had mastered adversity, we knew with certainty humanity was unstoppable. Humanity was extraordinary. Humanity was inevitable.